Please can you remind me if you'll be so kind, staring out into space, asking God to hear my case, trying to think of all things past. How long will my memory last? The purple angel, purple angel, purple angel, you're next to me.
Well, hi, everyone, and welcome to Alzheimer Speaks Radio. I'm your host and founder of Alzheimer Speaks, Lori LeBay, and we are here to shift your dementia care from crisis to comfort. And our goal is to do that all around the world because you know what? None of us is alone in this journey, even though there are times we really feel like we are. Just know that there are millions of us walking hand in hand with you, supporting you. I get the loneliness, the frustration, the guilt, the isolation, the exhaustion. But I've also, on my mother's journey of 30 years with this disease, have been able to walk out the other side and find that path of joy and purpose and passion. And that's why I started Alzheimer Speaks Radio, is to lift everyone up and try to get us to work collaboratively together because there are a lot more resources out there than you think there are. And so hopefully you'll listen in and you will share this with others in your group. If it's Facebook, Twitter, or LinkedIn, you see all of your likes, your clicks, and share have really raised our profile and pushed our content out to areas I never thought would exist. So thank you so much. And the only way we're going to win this battle is by working together. So again, thank you. And consider being a guest on the show. Everybody has a story to tell, and we are here to do that. So connect with me on alzheimerspeaks.com. There's a big contact button in the corner. Just reach out to me. I would love to talk with you. And know that your calls are always welcome on the show. You can call 323-870-4602, or you can always use our chat box as well. If you're kind of shy and don't like to talk, we get that as well. The other thing that Alzheimer's Speaks is we are kind of a media outlet, so we can help companies and individuals expand their brand footprint by leveraging all of our different platforms because we do a lot more than just radio and blog, and we do video interviews and live speaking as well as education through webinars and so forth. So check us out at alzheimerspeaks.com and let us know what we're missing and what we need to add. Now, before I introduce our guest today, I want to give a shout out to a few people. One is Lisa Marie Chirico. She is doing her second annual cruise, and I just think these dementia-friendly cruises are so important, but I also think that it's critical that you get in a group that really has your best interest at hand, and I can highly recommend Lisa's cruise. You can go to allscruisetropics.com. That's allscruisetropics.com, and you will be in good hands. She's got one coming up March 1st through the 8th of 2020. They're going to be going to the Western Caribbean on Holland America. And you can read on her website what people have to say. They talk about the speaker lineup being fantastic because she does do this cruise along with a conference. She said, someone said, we made new lifelong friends and learned a great deal. Highly recommended for anyone with any form of dementia and their care partners. It's a vacation to remember. Again, that's Lisa Marie Chirico at allscruisetropics.com. I also have to give a shout out to Stall Catchers. I love this game because any of us can play from age 6 to probably 96. We can actually analyze real life data for Alzheimer's research. So check out stallcatchers.com. And of course, I'd be amiss if I didn't mention the Memory Cafe directory. Dave does such a wonderful job with this. If you are in the U.S., Last I looked, we were over 800 memory cafes, and they are just growing every single month. And he's starting to develop a directory for various countries as well. Last thing I want to shout out to is a couple of events I've got coming up. November 13th through the 15th, I'll be with Artist Senior Living of Reading in Lexington, Massachusetts. And then November 20th through the 21st, I'm going to be down with Alabama Cares, the East Alabama Area on Aging. And you can just contact me for more information or go to the blog or website to find out information regarding those events as well. So today we're going to be talking about finding comfort in the journey. And oh my gosh, don't we all need to live in that space? And yet that's not where so many spend the majority of their time. Today we have Trish Laub, who is an expert, and she has become an expert because of her full-time care that she gave her parents, one with Alzheimer's disease. And she has gone through the end-of-life journey and really has a desire to help us with dignified care and finding balance. She became an unlikely expert on the topic of Alzheimer's disease, again, dignified care and end of life. And now she offers readers the opportunity to thrive during their caring process with a book series she wrote called Comfort in the Journey. And for more information on that series, as well as her speaking and consulting opportunities, you can just check out TRISHLAUB.com. And again, we're going to have just a fantastic conversation. So welcome, Trish. How are you doing today?
I am well, thank you. I'm excited to talk to you.
Well, I am thrilled to have you on your show. I was lucky enough you sent me copies of your books, which I just thought was absolutely wonderful. Why don't you set us up in terms of, why did you get involved giving care to your folks? What emerged and said, hey, you're it?
Well, my parents were two really, really phenomenally great people. And I had always just thought, someday I might, if they need care, I'd be happy to do that. I would love to do that. I had watched my parents take care of my mom's parents, my grandparents, who I adored. And, I didn't really give it a lot of thought. And then my husband and I moved from Chicago to Denver and, to be out here in the mountains. And I have two sisters out here, and my parents were doing pretty well. And 48 hours later, my dad went into medical crisis. And he had been probably at that point treated for Alzheimer's for about 10 years. But honestly, we were doing a pretty good job of keeping that situation stable. So I can't really say I considered it a problem. I know that's kind of a weird thing to say, but my dad went into medical crisis, and largely because he had been diagnosed with Alzheimer's, he went into full-bore tilt. He was over-medicated and mismedicated, and a 5-day skilled rehab stay turned into 63 days of 24-hour awake hell. And it took my family about 10 weeks after that to get my dad to be stable again and to be properly medicated and back to his baseline. And that was my entry thrown straight into the fire. I had been, wanting to help. I had a sister out here who was providing a little bit of coverage for my dad when my mom wanted to go see her girlfriends and everything. But we just went full bore into the fire with that experience. And 6 months later, my mom had an episode which ended up being stage 4 cancer. And so my sisters and I found ourselves in this fire. We were on fire. We did not know we're pretty capable people, but we didn't know what the resources were. We didn't know the questions to ask. We were making it up as we went, very, very much so.
Yeah. And I think that is what most of us do. I mean, like you said, you don't know what you don't know, and then and so you don't even know where to reach for help. You don't know what's out there, which is so important. Why did you decide to create Comfort in Their Journey?
It's kind of a weird little story. Um, you know, we were providing 24/7 care for both of my parents. Um, they preferred to stay in their home, and so I was running a crew of 9 caregivers on the schedule in a week. One sister and I were both on that schedule, and during the time when I would be driving, maybe up there at 6 o'clock in the morning, coming back at midnight, I would hear this little voice that said, "You're supposed to do something with this because this is not normal." Everything just blew up at the same time. I mean, it sounds kind of ridiculous, but both of my parents were 90 before they went into what I would call, crisis. Even though my dad had been living with Alzheimer's for a very long time, we didn't really hit critical mass until he turned 90. And I had moved out to Colorado. I only knew my sisters and their families, my parents, maybe 2 other people that I'd met in the grocery store because I didn't have time. And I started getting phone calls from people, and they would say, and it was our caregiver network telling other clients, and they would call and say, "Will you do this for my family?" And I'm thinking, are you kidding me? What? And then I had my financial planner, who was also a financial planner for my parents, called and said, "Trish, this information is your experience is really needed. Would you write books?" And again, I was exhausted and overwhelmed, and I said, "Of course not." No. And are you joking me? So I spent my parents both passed in 2014, and I spent the next 3 years actively talking myself out of doing this. I had written 2 books way back in 2005 on a completely different topic, and I thought there's no way I'm writing again. I had no intention of writing those books. And starting a business, my husband had just retired, and I thought, I'm home free. We're going to just go play in the mountains. So I spent 3 years really hardcore trying to talk myself out of it. And in 2017, I went to a workshop that a best friend of mine from high school was doing on figuring out what you're going to do in that next phase of your life. And I went with the very clear intention of walking away from this. And when I left that workshop, I was doing this. So it's a personal mandate. I didn't have a choice in this. This wasn't my choice. There's so many people out there. My sisters and I amassed so much information. I'm not saying we know it all, not at all. But what we did figure out was some things that worked. We figured out some questions that need to be asked. We figured out where some of the pitfalls are. So I resolved myself to write books, and my books are reference books. They're not necessarily designed to be read from beginning to end, because when we were in crisis, I didn't have time to read something from beginning to end. I needed to find the answer, and I needed to be able to move on. So if my newest problem was learning about a new, skilled nursing, we'd never experienced that. I didn't know what questions to ask when I walked into a skilled nursing facility. So I guess it's kind of a long answer. I'm sorry. I apologize. But it just took on a life of its own. And Comfort in the Journey was what it was all about: Alzheimer's, dignified care, and end of life. And I feel very, very strongly about all 3 of those issues. I don't feel that our country does a very good job with those 3 topics.
Oh, I so agree, and I, like you, this was not something I was going to do. This is kind of to me, it's like a God thing, and I'm not overly religious.
Yes.
I'm extremely spiritual, but I mean, I have had my screaming matches and go, no more. I'm not doing this anymore. I can't. It's just there's other things to do,
I
and then it's like,
understand.
And then it's like, ding, in goes something into my my email box, or bing goes my phone, and it's like, okay, you're supposed to be here. This is just the space you're supposed to be here. So stop fighting it. And so for the most part, I've just kind of resolved to that. And I love how you say, you've gotten all this information, but Lord knows it's not everything, because everybody's journey is a little bit different. And it's important for all of us to understand that and appreciate that, and know that we can learn from one another very easily if we just take the time to share. And I think, to me, that's one of the biggest, most critical pieces, is getting people to have the conversation and share the knowledge they have gained, because it just lightens the load for everyone else, you know, stepping on this path. And, you know, none of us are going on this path willingly. We all kind of just get thrown into the lion's den and then go, now what? Now where? So I appreciate all that you have contemplated to get to where you are. And your 3 books are just fabulous. You've got The Most Meaningful Life, My Dad and Alzheimer's. You have Through the Rabbit Hole, which I think a lot of people will gravitate to, navigating the maze of providing care. And then Peaceful Endings. What a beautiful title, Guiding the Walk to End of Life and Beyond. Because, and I think that beyond is really an important piece as well, that we come out as whole as possible. So why did you decide to write 3 books instead of just one?
That's a great question. I get asked that a lot. The reason I did, well, let me back up. First of all, I envisioned the book about my experience with my dad and Alzheimer's. And then I knew there was this big care piece. When I got to writing, actually what happened is I wrote the book on end of life. I wrote them all at the same time. It just happened. The short answer to your question is the 3 books are about 700 pages. I don't learn by reading. And yet I wrote 3 books of 700 pages. I broke them out because not everybody, fortunately, hopefully, not everybody will experience dementia or Alzheimer's. I have my close girlfriend in Illinois with her husband. She went straight to the end of life book. She never needed the care book. So I realized that some people, everybody joins the journey at a different place. Some people will need the dignified care book prior to the end of life book. Not everybody needs the Alzheimer's book. So I wanted them to be very, very specific. I intentionally worked to not duplicate information in 3 books. There are a couple exceptions to that. For example, patient advocacy, which I feel extremely strongly about. It's in all 3 books. It's most detailed in the Through the Rabbit Hole book. But I just wanted the books to be as small and concise and compact as possible so that someone could shove it in their purse, and while they're waiting in an appointment, they could look up the next issue that they're looking for. Or my girlfriend in Illinois called me, the one who needed the end of life book, called me one day and she said, Trish, my husband just got sent home from the hospital with oxygen. And I said, this page number might be wrong, but I said it was like 260, 261 in the 3rd book. That's all you have to read. So that she could get in and out of that book and read 3 pages.
Nice.
So that's why. And they really, honestly, people will say to me, did you go up into your office and say, I'm going to write this topic? I may have, but that's never the topic that popped out. These books just kind of wrote themselves. And I had to write all 3 at the same time.
And I think when it comes, you know, that fluid too, that to me is just a signal that you are in the space you're supposed to be in. No ifs, ands, or buts about it. Because I do really feel that there's that overall connection, you know, of God or spirit, whatever you want to call it, that's saying, I'll help you through this. You know, let's do this together, which is really a neat thing. If that brings you comfort, for me, it brings me a ton of comfort there. And I love that, you know, you set up the expectation of you don't have to read the whole book to get something out of this. You know, you can go to the parts that will meet your needs of that. One of the things I wanted to talk to you about was in terms of managing your parents' care. Can you tell us, you mentioned a sister, I don't know if there were other siblings, why you? How did you fall
I'm sorry,
into
why?
that? Why you of various family members were you kind of a primary care partner for your folks?
Um, so I have two sisters, and they both live out here as well. One had already, by the time I moved out here, she'd lived here about 16 years. And so if there was, any kind of medical, like my dad cut his face once and had to go to the hospital. So my sister oversaw those kinds of things. They weren't medical crises. They were just little things. She provided respite for my mom. So by the time I got here, she was a little weary. My other sister was working full time. And I was just the fresh energy that showed up. Actually, when this happened, my husband and I were in Spain visiting my daughter who was in school there. And I got the text message. My sister and I had a deal, a promise to each other that when we were out of town, if something happened to mom and dad, they'd let us know. So otherwise, we'd just worry the whole time. And I got this text message saying, my dad had this surgery and it was okay at that point in time. When I came home, because dad had Alzheimer's, the skilled rehab facility required us to stay, which we would have anyway. We stayed 24/7. When I got there, my mom was exhausted. My sisters were exhausted. I did 3 24, 36-hour shifts the first 5 days I was home. And so we, like I said, we entered fire, absolutely. But I was just fresh blood. My sisters, when I say I managed their care, I managed their everyday care, their, daily life. And I managed their medical. Now, when I say I managed it, I was primary. So there might be a day midstream where it happened. I walked to my parents' home, and my sister took one look at me, and she said, "You're out today. Go home." My sisters were in a position to pick up on medical. One sister did financial, another did insurance. But we all were in the loop on all of the areas. It's just a matter of who was primary, and I was primary on daily, which also meant the caregivers and the scheduling, and on medical. But we came up with kind of a communication system to keep each other up to date in case somebody got sick and had to step out or was exhausted and got sent home.
Well, how nice to have but to be able to have family members notice that. I think that's one of the things that families say is, how does nobody see how exhausted I am? Why aren't they helping? And for a family to have figured that out is huge. Now, is there in one of your books, do you cover that kind of family dynamic, and how do you set up that? How do you set up a family to be functional? I guess I'll just put it that way.
Well, first I will say I was very, very fortunate. Our family came together, and I hope nobody else has two parents in crisis to the degree that we did. When I said my mom 6 months after my dad went into medical crisis, started her medical crisis, she was fine making Christmas cookies with us on the 21st. And on the 22nd, she was in the hospital with somewhere between 8 and 14 individually life-threatening things, at the same time. She went from being healthy to that. We were very, very fortunate. We all, with the exception of one, and my daughter who lived somewhere else, we all lived in this area. So we had, I had my two sisters, we had grandchildren, we had great-grandchildren, and we were very fortunate that by and large, we all just put the family stuff aside and focused on my parents. In answer to your question, yes, I do address family in at least two of the books. The one where I really address it is in Through the Rabbit Hole. And I don't know, in answer to your question, that you can make a family be cohesive. What I try to address in that book is that, to me, my experience, not only with this, but everything in life, is once a family hits crisis, all its siblings turn into 5-year-olds again. And every wound and every push at the car and every little thing has the potential to come out again. And what I say to that is, if what's going to come during crisis, if what's going to come out of your mouth is not going to help the situation, suck it back in. So, in other words, if something between a sister and I, because we're siblings, was not going to be helpful to my parents, then now was not the time to address it. I also think that it's really, really important to play to people's strengths. So not everybody can be there. Some people are remote. I think that everybody can participate in some way, even if the person who can't be present, that's in another state, is sending a little card that says, "You go, girl." A food card. I had a friend in Illinois who would send me gift cards to food places. Yeah, I could afford to buy the food, but it made me go and it made me feel good. So people that can't actively participate can be the cheerleaders. I just think that there's so many family dynamics, and if you can, at minimum, if you can try to get everybody to focus on the goal, which is dignified care, then, there's a place to start.
Yeah,
a lot of families are messed up before crisis. You can't fix that.
Yep, yeah. Well, and our family got along really well, but when it came to the care, there was just such a division between myself and my younger and older brother, in terms of from my eyes, and we had this conversation, which I've mentioned before, about I was really organized in my eyes, and to them, I was a control freak. And, those things can get in the way, and they can also be leveraged as excuses on both sides. And so we really have to take an honest approach of what are each other's perceptions, what are people willing to actually commit to in time, in money, in task, and what is going to be best for the person that you're caring for. And so, but I think most families don't have that conversation. And what I learned was I needed to, after it took me probably 15 years to figure this out of a 30-year journey, that I just needed to let go and stop trying to fix them, to be like, think like me, because they weren't, and they never were going to be. And that was part of the beauty of their personal relationships with my parents.
Sure.
But most of us don't look at that. We start looking at who's doing more, and pushing the guilt out and feeling the resentment and the exhaustion that goes along with it, and all those things are real. So but again, I think it's very important for us to have honest conversations about all of those feelings, because they're all valid on every which side, if we want to admit it or not. I wanted to just dig through, your book about the most meaningful life, my dad and Alzheimer's, and just note a couple of things, because so much in all of your books really resonated with me. You have in here, life is 10% what happens to you, and 90% how you choose to respond to it, as an unknown. And I think that is, if people can accept that and really embrace, it's not about what's happening, it's about our reaction to it. And, if we were the person with a chronic illness or on our deathbed, would we want people frustrated and angry and, resentful, or would we want some peace and calm and laughter in terms of our relationship? And I think so often we forget about how we're coming off. There was another one, when you, and this is kind of what we were talking about, is a family's philosophy. Dad is still here. And so often I go around the country and speak as you do, and I think so often we hear, well, but they don't get it. But again, that's probably because their philosophy, their perceptions are totally different than ours. Their fears, can be so different as well. And so, we have to take all of that into account. And then in understanding life with Alzheimer's, different, not less, in chapter 10. I love that. I think we still have so many things that are in common, but when we focus on, all of the changes, and we perceive them as negative, our relationships are still there at the core if we choose to look for them, and if we choose to find them and build on them. And I think that's what you talk about is really this is kind of even though it's, people will say it's not normal aging, I'm at the point right now of arguing it is for a lot of people. It might not be normal aging, but it is their new normal. And we as society need to accept that. And I love, your books are just laid out really nice. They're big print for my old eyes of 60, which I so love. They're filled with lots of just good information and things that you may or may not even think about when it comes to comfort when we're caring. What does that really mean? I think we get so tied up in the task that we forget about that comfort piece. What would you say to a family who's really focused on the task and is starting to lose their relationship and may not even know that's what's happening?
Wow, that's a lot there. Okay. I think you said something that maybe I wrote it, maybe I didn't, I don't know, but you were talking about my book. You said this phrase that people say they don't get it. The reality is we don't get it. Mm-hmm. It is a different phase in life. I don't mean to minimize it by any means, but would it have been better if my dad had stage 4 cancer like my mom? It's just where we were. It wasn't. Mm-hmm. My dad wasn't a victim, and it wasn't a burden to me, and all of those things. It is 90% of your perspective. What do I say to the family? What would I say to the family that looks at it as the task? I would offer that they look at it just as where they are in their life. It was my choice. People said to me, how could I put my life on hold for my parents? I didn't put my life on hold. It was my life. And now my life is doing Comfort in the Journey. And before that, there was a part of my life I worked in corporate America. There was a part of my life when I did something else. It's just another part of my life. And I think maybe what it is, and you're helping me even see this, it's being present without judgment, that it's good or bad. It just is. And so whatever I have ever done in life, what I would recommend to them is that they do the best they can, mm-hmm. and feel good about that without a value judgment on it. So when I say do your best, I mean I did my best some days, and my best was pretty darn bad, but it was my best. Yeah. It was what I could do, and I feel for people. I understand it, and I feel for people that are in the position where they feel that it is a task list of checkoffs. I cannot even begin to verbalize the benefit that I got from being present with my dad. There's just no words to put that into. Being present and just going with the flow of the day. There were jewels that I found in that process that I will never find. I have never found before, and I'll never find again. And so I guess my suggestion is to be present, mm-hmm. present, to participate in it, to understand that their reality is equally as real as our reality, and it's not better or worse. It's just different.
Exactly.
You said this the thing about different, not less. People with Alzheimer's still have as many as 90 billion brain cells working. Play to the strength. Find those brain cells. Use them. There's so much. My dad probably had Alzheimer's for over 20 years. He was still absolutely in there. I could connect in a heartbeat with him. I'm not mm-hmm. saying everybody can do that. I'm certainly not. I'm just saying my motto is if it was possible for me and my dad, then it's possible for somebody else.
I totally agree. Yeah, I totally agree. I think, sometimes that whole being present, I think for a long time people, felt, oh, it's a new age. It's way out there. It's mm-hmm. against my religion. I mean, there are so many different things attached to that. And it's like, one of the things that I talk about is that, being present is the only place you can identify joy or create it.
Yeah.
If you're not present in the moment, it'll never be a memory, and you can never create it. So and that's really what we all want is joy and comfort. And so I'm with you.
Mm-hmm.
It's hard to sum into words the gifts wrapped in this journey, the lessons learned that apply to all of life, not just when you're dealing with somebody who happens to have a chronic illness or dementia. I mean, this can make you a better person. And I always thought I was a good one. I think I'm a better one. I still think I got a long ways to go, and that there's a lot more lessons out there to learn. But I think it's well worth the try. And I love how you really came to grips with, I did the best I could. With the energy you had, if it was the money, the time. All of those things, all the to-dos on your list, all we can expect out of anyone is to do the best they can. But then if they feel like they failed or they could have done better, then take that piece as a gift and learn from it. So next time you can apply what you've learned. And I think sometimes we don't apply that. We just kind of keep beating ourselves up on that. Now, in your book, the one Through the Rabbit Hole, I love this saying by Josh Shipp that you quote: you either get bitter or you get better. It's that simple. You either take what you've been dealt and allow it to make you a better person, or you allow it to tear you down. The choice doesn't belong to fate. It belongs to you. I just think that is such a, the quotes that you've picked out really lift your comments off the page. I mean, they just support them so nicely to say, you know what, we all have our power of one, and we got to stop blaming everybody else for what's happening in our life and move forward with it and learn from it. You talk also about a second wave in this book. I don't know if that's enough to give you give you where I am in the book. I'm on page, I want to say 54. But you say there will come a time when you have gathered and organized the information necessary for the immediate care needs, and you just have to take a breath. So what do you have to say about that second wave? Because I think that's a really powerful thing too.
Wow. I'm trying to catch up with you here. I'm struggling with the context of the second wave, and I did say that.
I can read a little bit more here. I'm just kind of pulling things. I just, like I said, I think you write so beautifully. You may be lucky enough to coast for a while in a stable care situation, or you may only have a moment to regroup before another part of the journey is presented. In either case, you're probably at the beginning of a much longer journey for which you need to prepare. And then you go on to talk about peaceful endings. Yeah.
So in our example, in my situation, we my parents had done their estate planning. They had done as much as they could. They did a good job. Part of what threw us when we got lit on fire was that we really hadn't been in the medical system or the care world. And so we didn't understand any of that. So we had to get through the first crisis, and we did kind of hit a little bit of a lull time, not a lull, but a rhythm. We hit a rhythm. But I also knew more crises were coming and end of life was coming. And I'm a big proponent of people having the conversations about end of life, doing what I call preemptive preparedness. So looking at your estate planning, it's a lot more complicated than it used to be, and yet it's not complicated. I know that's contradictory, but to be prepared, and that concept goes back to what I've found is, what I've started saying is the care journeys tend to either be sprints to a cure or marathons to the end. The sprint, you can probably survive without being prepared.
Mm-hmm.
The marathon, not so much. The marathon is like running a marathon, and I have friends that are marathoners, and they say the more prepared you are, the better you train, the better you recover. So the same concept applies to end-of-life planning.
Mm-hmm.
And end-of-life planning isn't just a will or a trust or a power of attorney. And although what I found in my experience is that many people do not understand that terminology. So at minimum, is during the care process, if you learn to understand the difference between a power of attorney and a personal representative, all of those pieces that you can be learning or preparing while you're taking a breath, that breath is important too, the self-care thing. All of those things that you can better do to better prepare yourself will help you recover. They provide resiliency, and resiliency is how you thrive versus survive.
Which makes a lot of sense. A lot of sense. And I think sometimes,
I don't know if that answered your question, but
yeah, I think it is just, I think it does. And it's about, I think about being conscious to even recognize when you have those moments, because sometimes we just spin so fast that we don't even recognize there's a lull, that it's like, okay,
yeah.
I got this figured out. And we're almost, because I think we're fearful of something else to come. And so we start spinning in something else before it even hits. And
right.
So you kind of keep that high anxiety going, which isn't healthy for anybody, especially the care partner, because, stress can kill. And we've got to be able to find that balance there. You talk about this is just another quote you have in here, things that we found helpful. You noted, some days are just bad days. That's all. You have to experience sadness to know happiness. And I remind myself that not every day is going to be a good day. That's just the way it is. And that was Dita Von Ten's. And I think that that's so important too, because I think we do kind of freeze frame the good stuff. And we have this expectation that life should be perfect. Well, it sure as heck wasn't before disease and chronic illness hit. So why do we even make that an expectation or a thought? That's been one that it just always stumps me. And I did it too, because that's the way I wanted life to be. I wanted to get on the other end of the teeter-totter. But I don't think you even realize, you're not being rational, when you're doing that. And then in your Peaceful Endings book, I think, one of the things you have here is, and maybe if you can explain this, is how do we take the fear and negativity out of end-of-life planning? And I know that you have kind of broken that down, and I think that that's just a wonderful, you have an acronym for fear. So if you can talk about that a little bit, I think that would really help our audience as well.
Well, I think, talking about end of life is an interesting thing. Almost every other culture does it except us. And if you really think about it, I had to go through this thought process. 1900s era of my grandparents, people died young. Wagon trains, the number of people who died on wagon trains is staggering. They had to bury their family members and move on. It was a part of their lives. And in our culture today, we celebrate babies being born, and we help the family, the parents, and we give them gifts and bring them food and all of these different things. And we don't. It's the 800-pound elephant in the room. Nobody wants to talk about it. And the benefit to talking about, well, first of all, people are reticent to do it because it makes you face your mortality. Mm-hmm. And we don't like to think about that. We live in a culture that wants to pretend that we don't age. And so it brings up all kinds of fears. And for the potential survivors, for the adult children, families, they all of a sudden, or a spouse may start thinking, oh my gosh, what am I going to do when this person dies, and all of these other things. If you can flip that around and realize what a gift it is when someone does end-of-life planning, all of the people in their lives don't have to guess at what that person wanted. That is a horrible responsibility to be faced with. I spoke with somebody at a mortuary, and they said, you know, the two questions that people say after a loved one has passed is, did I do what they wanted? And did I do the right thing? Well, if that's all planned ahead of time, your family isn't left asking those questions. And so I have, you know, worked with people who have documented down to, I want to be in a transition room, and I want this music and this lighting and this essential oil and all of these other things. They're now beginning to create their own specifications for exactly how they want things at the end of their life. And the relief, that is a huge gift for family members. So if they can look at it not as, you know, this morbid, horrible thing, but rather as one of the greatest gifts they can possibly give their families, it might shift that. Now, I also think that people need to start this process when they're in their 20s, but and then, you know, modify per every life event. I think we're grossly unprepared for end of life.
Oh, I agree. I know when we were trying to get my folks to do their end of life planning, you know, estate planning, funeral, the whole 9 yards, healthcare directives, and they're like, oh, you know, we don't have to do that. And I just said, Tom and I will do it with you, you know, because this is about smart living. It you know, we should be doing this at 18, you know, 20 years old. Whenever we become an adult, or right before, we should be talking about this stuff and having the paperwork in order to make everybody's life a little easier. And why we don't, again, is all based in that, you know, bucket of fear. And you talk about fear being false evidence appearing real. And I think that is beautifully stated. And we dig our heels in when we are, you know, when there is fear of the unknown. And, you know, we kind of get caught up in all the minutiae. And you can't always be logical, you know, with that. How do you think families should help themselves kind of muddle through that fear? Do they feel it and then let it go? And, you know, what are your thoughts?
You know, I guess it's hard for me to really have an opinion on that. I have, you know, a girlfriend whose husband passed recently, and we went through the whole transition process. But about 2 years ago, she called me up and she said, Trish, how am I going to get through this? And I said, well, give me a few days. I'll be there. I'll come. We'll talk. And I sat down and I said, what are your fears? And she started talking. And we just talked very calmly and rationally about each fear. And I said, choice is a big thing for me. Choice is probably the single most empowering thing in the whole care journey, in life, in everything. I said, you have a choice. And something else I say in my book is, you know, fear can mean forget everything and run, or it can mean face everything and rise. And I said, which are you going to do? Are you going to retreat? Or are you going to rise? And she was the person who was my learning experience on the sprint versus the marathon. I said, you have a marathon in front of you, and it is daunting. Absolutely. And she was exhausted from the sprint. And I said, but, you know, let's talk about your fears. She did not know how she was going to exist without her spouse. They're very, very close. Very connected. We talked about that. We talked about, was she going to be financially okay? I just said, let's list them. Let's go. What's the next one? What else are you afraid of? That worked for her. I don't, you know, not everybody's of the kind that can just open up and talk about that. So I don't necessarily have a good response for that. But what I will say is everything in life is a choice. It is a choice whether you face your fears or you don't. It is a choice. It's a choice whether you retreat or you rise. You know, it's a choice to be present. It's a choice to provide care. So I know that there is the potential for resentment when someone is providing care, but if they can recognize that they made the choice to provide care, that is empowering. And what I would say to someone who is in that situation is, I would say make a different choice then. If you're not the person to provide the care, then maybe find someone else who can. But everything is a choice. And so I guess that I kind of, I went off on a tangent from fear, but, I can't really tell somebody how to deal with fear. I very much look at the caregiving process. Am I a fan of end of life? No. Did I want my parents to go? No. But I wanted more for them to have the end of life that they wanted than for me to have them linger. Everything is that choice. And I think that providing care for another person is one of the few opportunities in life where you have the opportunity, if you choose, to find out exactly what you're made out of.
Yep.
And that can be scary. That can be very scary.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful
rise. Sorry?
I was just going to say, it's such a beautiful thing if you allow it to be a beautiful thing to be with somebody as they pass. I mean, to me, it's just such an honor, and there's something about it. I mean, it's right up there with being present when there's a birth. It fills you, even though
I think birth. I didn't mean to interrupt you. Birth and death, I think, are the two times that you can be closest to a person's soul. There's birth, they come in with no baggage. In the situations and the times that I have gone through, and I'm sure it's not always, but the transitions that I have been a part of, the person has been stripped of all the earthly stuff. And so I think that birth and death are the two opportunities to be as close to a pure soul as you can be.
Yep, I agree.
And it is an honor in both cases, on both ends of the process.
Yeah, and you never know. I mean, every death, like every birth, like every person is different. When my dad died of brain cancer, I was with him, and I could literally, I was touching his chest and telling him it was okay to go. And I actually felt his energy go right up through my arm. It was just electrifying. And my brother was sitting right there. I'm like, touch him. And he didn't feel anything, but we were just, it was like nothing I've ever experienced ever, and I've been with a lot of people who have passed. When my aunt was dying, I had a dream that my uncle came and, said, go tell Kay it's time. And I went to her and I told her, I explained what she looked like, and she was in hospice and, pretty much in a coma. And they said, she's not going to react. She's not going to squeeze your hand. She's not going to open your eyes. She's not going to talk. And she ended up squeezing my hand, opening her eyes, and having this brilliant smile. And the room got chilly, and she just looked at the ceiling with this bright smile. And I know she connected with him on some level. And then she squeezed her hand, she shut her eyes, but her smile remained. And I stayed with her an extra, 20 or 30 minutes. And then I went home, and 2 hours later she passed. And I just thought, when I got the call, I was just so happy that I helped her pass. That, because apparently she had some fear of that, is kind of the message I was getting from my uncle. And it was just unbelievable. Or even when my mom passed, I wasn't there, but my daughter we were doing FaceTime, and I got to see her last breath. And that was just like, I was in Arizona speaking because she said, you're not going to be here. I mean, she came to me in dreams and said, you will not be here. I need you gone. I need to know you're going to carry on your work, and the rest of the family needs to understand the dying process. And they won't do that if you're here. And it was like, and then I was given this whole other tool of being able to use a video, which I just thought we'd talk on the phone, and my daughter would hold the phone up to her and stuff. And it was like, oh my gosh, I didn't miss anything in her dying process. I was part of the last rites. I was part of, when one of my brothers kind of got out of line, no one would put him in his place, and I could do that through video. and then everyone,
Mm-hmm.
the tension broke, everyone laughed, and then kind of moved on, and it was just our family normal. So there's so many beautiful things that can
Oh,
that can
yeah.
come out of this. It really
And I
is.
do think that I think you hit on something that's important to me. I do think that we have the ability to impact the transition process. So, like you said, you think there was some fear involved. There was some fear involved for my dad. And had he not had Alzheimer's, he probably would have processed that fear a little bit differently. But everybody, every caregiver, my sisters, my mom, we were all doing our work on our end to reassure him that he was safe and it was okay, that what he was fearful of would not be an issue for him. And, I think, and we actually, it kind of on the video part with my friend's husband in Illinois who passed recently, we really couldn't figure out why he hadn't gone yet. And we stopped and we took a look at it, and we figured out he needed to talk to his brother and his one granddaughter again. So we put that phone up to his ear. And pretty much as soon as he had heard from both of them again, even though he was not conscious, he was done.
He was okay.
And we had to think, what is it he's waiting for? What is it he wants? And I couldn't agree with you more. I think there is great beauty in that process. Amazing, amazing beauty.
Yeah. And transitions can be so funny. I'll throw one funny story in, and then we'll have to wrap up here. But my husband's mother was passing, and at this time we were just engaged, and Tom was Catholic. So I assumed his mom was. And so the nurse had come in and said, "Do you want a priest?" So I said, "Sure." And here she's on her deathbed. Everyone's coming to say goodbye. Tom's sitting there holding her hand. And the priest comes to the end of the bed, and her eyes aren't even open. And she smacks Tom, with a force, just takes her arm and just bangs him in the chest and says, "You son of a bitch, I'm not ready to go yet." And she got out of bed. She grabbed her oxygen and her IVs, and she did a skip to the bathroom. She lasted 2 more days. And I didn't know what was going on. Tom was shocked, and then he saw the priest and goes, "Oh my gosh, my mom's not Catholic." And I'm like, "I am so sorry, but we got 2 more days out of her." And I got to see this spunky woman I had always heard about, but had only seen ill. There can be tremendous moments of joy and memory built around that. Trish, now for people to get a hold of you, they can go to your website. Again, I'm just going to spell it out, is TRISHLAUB.com. That's TRISHLAUB.com. And you can email her at info at the same .com there, Trish Laub. Like I said, I love what you're doing. I love your books and the resources that you have at the end of them for people. I just think you offer us as family members and also as professionals such gifts of insight. So thank you and your family for all you've been through and your willingness to share and package it the way you have. It's quite impressive.
Well, thank you. I appreciate that feedback, and I think that any caregiver that is brave enough after they've had some time to regroup to share their stories, we need every person who's willing to share. The national caregiving crisis is gigantic, and it's escalating, and it's projected to be much bigger than now. We need every caregiver who's been through the tunnel to pull the next one through.
I
Both
agree.
hands, maybe. Go 2 through at a time.
Yeah.
So,
well,
thank you.
Thank you
for
again.
all you do.
Thank you. And for our listeners, again, thank you. Please share, like this episode, push it out there. It is something that people do need to hear. And don't forget to visit Maria Shriver's website, the Women's Alzheimer's Movement. They're going to be doing their big Move for Minds event this November. And you might also want to check out the Roberto app, which measures brain function through playing video games. In the meantime, we will be back in a couple of days. So talk to you soon. Thanks, everyone. Bye now.
It's time to rethink, renew, and reimagine retirement. Hey, everybody. Jared Sebesti here, host of Retire Repurposed. Now, this podcast is about the non-financial parts of retirement, which many times can be even more challenging than the financial. We believe retirement is not the end, rather the beginning of what could be the most impactful, purposeful, and fulfilling season of a person's life. So don't retire, become repurposed. To listen now, search Retire Repurposed on your favorite podcast platform, Senior Resource, or Life Audio.